took pales in comparison to what you guys get. So I love to like sit in on these mini retreats because I feel like I just gained so much. But we did take the promises we were making in the wedding ceremony very seriously. Among those, of course, as we just heard from Deacon, are you prepared to accept children lovingly from God and to bring them up according to the law of Christ and His church? We talked a little about children. We were both excited to hopefully be parents at some point. I knew a lot of friends who had done NFP, so it was a familiar thing to me. I was like, yeah, let's do it. But Dan never really heard of it or thought of it one way or another, so we really like had to kind of enter into space together to like really figure out the why. Do we want to do this, and why are we doing it? And ultimately, we decided that we were just convinced that NFP was one way to respect God's design for sex. And so from the beginning of our marriage, we were aligned in how we were going to discern child spacing, which is really interesting. That was easy, but for the first couple years of marriage, we lived in Iowa. Well, Dan finished law school, and I supported us financially by continuing to work remotely for a print media company. We were excited to have kids, but decided to avoid pregnancy for the time being with a simple thermal couple-to-couple league method of NFP, because law school is super intense and a lot going on. But there was one point when I realized, and I wondered briefly, I was like pregnant, and I started flipping out. I was so panicked. I was like, I'm excited to be a mom, but like the timing could not be worse. If I have this child, we're gonna give birth on finals week of his third year, and finals week is like, you don't sleep, you study, you're always behind, you can never learn all there is to know, and it's an awful week. And to have a baby in the middle, that was like, this is the worst thing ever. So I was so afraid to tell Dan, and eventually I just couldn't hold it any longer, and we were riding in the car, and I was like, Dan, I'm already pregnant, the baby would be born like during finals week, and this is the worst thing ever. And Dan was like, oh, that'd be so exciting. And I was like, did you not hear me? Like, this is the worst. And Dan was like, oh, yeah, like, it'd be challenging to figure out what we're gonna do during that week, but like, we'll figure it out. And I didn't end up being pregnant, so kind of dodged that. But as it turned out, it just was a pivotal moment for me, where Dan's ability to see the bigger picture and maintain joy in like what is fundamentally a good thing, even when the circumstances don't seem ideal. It was just a reminder for me, and also that I could trust of Dan and also of God. Those early years for us, pre-kids, were filled with a lot of learning. We were learning about, everything about ourselves in a new way. Learning about bodies, which are just really messy and crazy and unpredictable and really comfortable and vulnerable. So, especially in fertility, which goes to the heart of who we are as human persons. This is great. Anyway, one thing I've been particularly grateful to with NFP is that it has forced us to have conversations that I would have personally preferred to avoid, ever, just never talk about it. But working through those things for both of us has been a way that we have grown closer in intimacy in all parts of just who we are as persons. I've grown in my own comfortableness, to be fully myself and to not want to hide from Dan in certain things. And Dan has also grown both in that and also the sensitivity to where are you at and wanting to just really be really attentive in meeting me there. So towards the end of law school, Dan and I were with his mother one night when she suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, which landed her in the ER. She did live, but spent a week in a coma, and which rendered her permanently blind and disabled. It was, of course, an intense time during the coma, and also coming out of that, as we were just adjusting to a new normal. And in the aftermath, we just saw so starkly how fragile life is, and how each day is really not guaranteed to us. And so we felt kind of a sense of why wait for the perfect time to start our family? And so we moved from being intentionally TTA, which is trying to to TTW, which is trying to whatever. Which is a fun place to be, by the way. I remember the elation that I felt with my first positive pregnancy test. I was so excited. I think I did a little dance, and I was like, "This is just the best thing I could have ever hoped for." So I told Dan my birthday, and we started sketching out what about different names and pregnancy announcements, all these things like that. And a week later, oh my goodness, she's excited. She's so excited. But unfortunately, a week later, I started bleeding. And even before the doctor confirmed, I knew that we had lost our little one. It just was, where am I? So sorry. I was gonna bring my laptop and I can't find my charge cord because I think one of the kids ran off with it. Right. Okay. Yes. Anyway, we lost our little one and just cried and cried. And it was such a strange kind of grief for me, and it felt so isolating because I had I can't even really describe it. I had known this little spark of life in me, and I felt the emptiness afterwards. I physically felt this emptiness. We didn't even end up having a body to bury because just so early, which just further added to the surrealness of it all. And we also mourned the sudden emptiness of the life that we had imagined over the next 9 months, 18 years, all of it. But I did feel comfort in sharing the experience with our family and our friends who had experienced miscarriage themselves and understood. And I had to honestly ask some questions and face kind of what do I truly believe about where my baby might be and what I believe about life after death. Just wanted to note on that we do live in a world that promises control and avoidance of suffering. If you want something, you can pay for it, it's yours. And if something is broken, it can be fixed. But we are sometimes reminded that this is just actually an illusion, and nothing could actually fix this. I couldn't bring my baby back. I couldn't return my mother-in-law to the life that she had lived and had expected to live. And even so, even in that reality that we had to face, we can live in the hope that God can and does work through our suffering and redeems it, often in unexpected ways. When we decided to try again for a rainbow baby, it didn't take long before we got a second pregnancy test. We were very excited, a little nervous, but grateful for another chance. I'll never forget going into an early ultrasound to confirm this pregnancy and seeing something on the screen. And I knew what an empty womb looked like. And to see something there was like, oh my gosh, it's there. So the pregnancy went fairly well. And in December, we welcomed our son, Michael. He was adorable, the sweetest, cutest thing you'd ever seen. We were so happy, we were so over the moon. And then we went home, and the rubber hit the road, and the transition to motherhood hit me like a train. And even though I'd been I was so excited to be a mother, I was like, I feel like God tricked me. I feel so awful. I was struggling, I was not sleeping. Breastfeeding was intensely painful. Everything seemed unpredictable. It was relentless. It was what are days? What are nights? What are weeks? Weekends? Just time was just crushingly relentless. And so I just started measuring time and I kept him alive for another day. I kept him alive for another day. I just willingly just and anyway, so at one point it was 3 a.m. and Dan also we have awesome families, but they were not super proximate, and we also had no community in Des Moines at that moment because we were there just for a year. And so one morning at 3 a.m. I pointed my finger at Dan and I said, "We will never, ever, ever, ever have any more children, ever." I was I can be pregnant, I will give birth, but postpartum is going to kill me. And Dan was okay, why don't we just get you back to bed? It's you think I'm kidding? We will never do this again. And I was well, we're still going to just try and put a little bit of anyway, fast forward a few months, things that I got considerably. I found a way to sleep more consistently. And then I was babies are so nice. And so anyway, 9 months later, Claire joined the crew. And the only sad thing about that is that we just barely missed the cutoff for her and Michael, the Irish twins. And, what can you do? Dan's still gunning for the Irish twins, but anyway, with the 2 little ones, 13 months apart, we started training again with symptothermal and waited a year and a half before we decided to try for another baby. We moved to Minneapolis in that time, and the transition from 1 to 2 went really well. But what we hadn't really thought about NFP between the 2 kids, it had become clear with all 3 pregnancies so far that apparently after having a baby, my body takes like a 20-minute power nap, and it's just like, where's the next one? So like we just were like, hey, let's just slow things down a little bit. I just need a little bit of a break. And so we were pretty diligent in learning the postpartum protocol for a while and successfully avoided pregnancy for 5 years. I will say when it comes to discernment, it's interesting to see how things work between 2 different people, because these are conversations that really require an openness to the other spouse, a real honesty, a vulnerability, and we just kind of need to kind of continue to like check in with each other about where we're at with things. At a certain point, we both felt like things were in a pretty good place, and that we'd again be at TTW. As expected, we were quickly pregnant with Angela, who arrived in January of 2020. What we did not expect was that the world began the week after her baptism. And so then we decided to adopt a puppy. And then Dan was laid off from his job. And then he got appendicitis. And there was a hiring freeze. And so he's in the hospital, then he came home. So I was standing there with a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, infant, a puppy, a husband on bed rest, and I had a full-time job too. Anyway, a few months later, Danica recovered. He'd been on kid duty while I was working and looking for a new job. He found a new job, thank goodness. But then at a certain point, I was like, wow, I feel a little off. I was like, wow, I feel a little off yesterday. I feel a little off today. And I was like, man, what's wrong with me? Do I have like a terrible disease? I don't know. I was like, well, before I call the doctor, I'm just going to take a quick pregnancy test just to rule that out. And I took the pregnancy test, and I was like, I mean, I didn't even think about it. It was just like, boom, pregnant. And it was like, oh, what? And I was so thrown off and so like, this is really unexpected. And I don't know that I'm feeling like excited about this. I just kind of like went and like stood in the doorway and just like looked out. And I was like, wow, what are we gonna do now? Like 4 kids, that feels like a lot. And it took me a while to kind of come around. But luckily, God gives us 9 months to prepare for. And I don't know, by the time Rosie arrived, it just felt like she'd always been here. And it also facilitated some things that we've been kind of flirting around with, some changes that we needed to make. And so actually, like, Rosie's unexpected arrival kind of like actually made those things happen, which we wanted to happen and just couldn't kind of make happen. So grateful for that. Anyway, I always like to get serious again, and we also wanted to find a different method that was a little bit easier to do and a little less subjective. So we learned the Marquette method of NFP, which requires a monitor that tests hormone levels, but it takes a lot of the mental effort out of charting and interpreting that chart, which is very helpful when you have 4 little ones. So anyway, that gave me a really good time to let me recover, let us focus on rebuilding some healthy physical and mental and spiritual habits for both of us. This is our longest gap between kids, and then a couple years in, it just, I don't know, we like having people around. So we were like, let's have another baby. So we got pregnant, and then unfortunately experienced a second miscarriage. And also as a side note, both of our miscarriages have carried great grief for us. We've never tried to hide them from our other kids, and they do know about their 2 little tiny siblings in heaven by name, and it's been a healing reminder that the veil between the community of saints and those of us still on earth is not maybe as great as we imagined it to be. So we were still open to the possibility of another baby. This time it actually took a few months for us to get pregnant. Margaret arrived a year and a half later in all of her feistiness, and when the other kids came spilling into the birth center room after she was born, it was like the joy in that room was just, I genuinely thought like my heart would just burst from happiness. My son like took her little hand and he was like, I'm going to do what old-fashioned nights used to do for ladies, and he kissed her on the hand. And I was like, oh my gosh. Then my little brother was just like, can we keep her forever? I said, yes. And then my other daughter just said, Opie, you are so welcome in the world. I was just like, oh my gosh, why don't that's why we keep having babies is because Anyway, so then at a certain point, it was like, well, with Michael and Claire are like little buddies, and Angie and Rosie are little buddies, and then we have Margaret. Like, well, she is a little buddy. So anyway, here's Bridget. Little buddy. Have you ever heard the story about how to eat an elephant? Like, you try to eat the whole thing at once, like, you can't do it, but you just gotta eat like a little bite at a time, and pretty soon, after a while, you'll eat the whole elephant. So if someone would have 10 years ago said, this is your life in Cliff Notes, there's going to be 6 living kids in 8 years, there's going to be 2 miscarriages, mental health challenges, hospital instant job changes, all that, I would have said, well, that sounds like a crazy life. I don't know that I'm gonna like go ahead and sign up for that one. Maybe I'll choose something a little bit harder, maybe. You know, our life muscles are made up of the day-by-day decisions that we make. And you know, hopefully we're making those decisions together as spouses, rooted in prayer, prudently with the information we have available to us, and then we go confidently in that direction. And I once heard a saying that the past belongs to God's mercy, the future belongs to his providence, but the present belongs to love. And so our God is dynamic, invites us into that creative unfolding of our life, and to respond in love here, now, today. And so with our cooperation, we like just our life unfolds in front of us. As I wrap up, I just want to, I guess, share some encouragement that there's no one right way that family life looks. We're not playing a comparison game. I'm not trying to win a race or a contest unless it's good for the cutest baby. But at the heart of our life, at the heart of Dan and my life, we are simply aiming to do 3 things, and I offer them to you if they're helpful as you grow as spouses and discern the will of God for your lives. 1, our desire is to honor God and his design for marriage and sexuality by giving ourselves to each other fully, freely, and faithfully, and in a way that doesn't thwart the punitive nature of sex, that's oriented towards procreation. Number 2, we seek to honor each other as spouses and working on being more patient, receptive, attentive to the health and the well-being of each other. And 3, committing to living from a place of generosity, and that's my husband, and receptivity.
I'll take Bridges.
Okay.
Super Dad to the rescue.
Number 3. Committing to living from a place of generosity and receptivity with the people God has given to us. So for us, that's our 6 children, but it's also our greater families. It's the community around us. It's even communities whoever God puts in our path. Corporal works of mercy are something we really try to practice as a family. And it turns out you can get a lot of extra practice feeding the hungry and clothing the naked any day of the week in your own home, even when the 2-year-old consistently refuses to wear pants. Inspired by, I thought it was homely this morning, thank you. What we're invited to do as spouses is to show up fully for the other person and being willing to receive and love the other, even in the weakness. And sorry, Dan, I'm gonna talk about you. Yesterday, I was feeling really frustrated with something involving Dan. And something that's just something I know about him, but I just was so frustrated about it. And he finally took me by the hands and he was like, Laura, will you marry me? And I was really cranky and I was like, I already did. And he was like, yeah, but like, will you marry me like now? Will you like love me? And will you love this part of me? And so I said yes, because that's the right answer. But I just, something I really appreciate about you is that you take yourself lightly and that you're just willing to like own yourself and all of your weakness. And
you can also say what it is. Like sometimes I struggle with motivation, sometimes I struggle with discipline. And one of the hard things about that is it doesn't just impact me. That's a thing that impacts the people around me, especially like in a busy house like ours. Like if I'm struggling with motivation during the week and I'm not getting all my work done, my work still has to get done. And so that means that I'm carving time out of family time to do my work. And often that's at a drop of the hat. My job's one that even if I'm getting everything done, like stuff just like jams up our schedule a lot. So it's a stressor for me. It's a stressor for Laura. It's a stressor for our kids, and it's a hard one, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's the question yesterday was like, will you marry this part of me, the part of me that struggles with motivation, the part of me that struggles with discipline, the part of me that makes life complicated, and it's a hard thing to love, right? I know that,
Yeah.
and it's still part of me. So.
It is. And it reminds me of the little line from Les Mis, which is to love another person is to see the face of God. So it's like we like stand in front of each other. We're practicing standing before God and who we are in all of it. So anyway, as you get married and the story of your own marriage begins to unfold, you don't know what that looks like. I mean, pregnancy, miscarriage, infertility, loss, anything. Family life, I just invite you to a community with other people. Family life is meant to be nestled in community, and joys are celebrated, and challenges are more easily borne when we can share them and love with other people. God bless you and your marriage.